A retired mob boss walked into a courtroom, took the stand, and testified on behalf of the black teenage girl who had saved his life on a subway platform 18 months earlier. The prosecutor asked him why. He said, "Because she was the only person in that entire train car who looked at me and saw a human being instead of a headline. And I had been waiting 44 years for someone to do that." The courtroom went silent. What nobody in that room knew was how it started, what she gave up to do it, what he did next that nobody asked him to do, and what happened 3 years later that neither of them ever saw coming. This is that story. Layla Brooks had learned early that the world does not slow down for grief. She was 13 years old when her father died. James Brooks had been a construction foreman, a Sunday morning pancake maker, the kind of man who remembered every birthday and showed up to every school play even when the shift ran long. He died of pancreatic cancer on a Thursday in November, and by the following Monday, Layla had already understood that the life she had known before that Thursday was a different life entirely. Her mother, Carol, did everything she could. She worked double shifts at the hospital laundry, picked up weekend cleaning jobs, kept the electricity on and the rent paid and food in the refrigerator with the particular fierce competence of a woman who has decided that her child will not feel the full weight of what has happened if she can help it. For 5 years, Carol held the line. Then her heart began to fail. It did not fail dramatically. It failed the way things fail when they have been under too much pressure for too long. A little shortness of breath. Then more. Then a diagnosis that came with a treatment plan and a monthly medication cost that consumed a third of what Carol was making. And then the day Carol could not complete a shift without sitting down every 20 minutes. And then the day her doctor said the words, "You cannot continue working in your current capacity." And the whole structure Carol had built to protect her daughter shifted its weight entirely onto Layla. Layla was 18 years old when that happened. She was a senior at Jefferson High on the south side of Chicago. She had a 3.9 grade point average and a dream of becoming a nurse and a plan that required getting into a program, surviving 4 years on loans and scholarships, and coming out the other side with a career that could actually support both of them. The plan was possible. It was not easy. Nothing about Layla's life was easy. She worked the early morning shift at the convenience store on Halstead, 5:30 to 8 a.m., then went directly to school, then came home to check on her mother and put something together for dinner, then worked the evening shift washing dishes at a restaurant on Wentworth, home by 11, in bed by midnight, alarm at 4:55. She did this 6 days a week. On Sunday, she studied. Her clothes told the story if you knew how to read it. The uniform she had worn for 2 years, washed so many times the black had gone gray. The shoes with the heel worn through on the left side. The way she never bought lunch and always had a container she had packed the night before. Her classmates were not cruel about it, mostly. They just quietly arranged their social lives around the assumption that Layla would not be joining them. And Layla quietly confirmed that assumption by never having time to join anyone for anything. She did not think of herself as lonely. She thought of herself as focused. On the morning that changed everything, she boarded the Red Line at 7:42 a.m. with a bio exam in third period and 4 hours of sleep and exactly one thing on her mind, which was the cellular structure of a human kidney. She was not thinking about Frank DeLuca. Nobody was ever really thinking about Frank DeLuca until they had no choice. He was the first thing you saw when you got on that train car. 6'2", 240 pounds, a white man in his mid-40s with a shaved head and a face that looked like it had been through a serious amount of living, most of it not the kind you brag about. The tattoos started at his wrists and disappeared up under his collar, and the suit he wore was clean and pressed, and somehow made the whole picture more rather than less, the way a frame sometimes draws more attention to the thing inside it. Frank DeLuca had run the north side of Chicago for 11 years. He had built something that operated like a business and consumed people like a machine, and had made him rich in the way that certain kinds of success make you rich, not just with money, but with the particular insulation of a man whom other men are afraid to disappoint. He had believed for a long time that this was power. He had believed for a long time that power was the same thing as safety. Then his nephew Marco, who was 23 years old and who Frank had personally recruited into the organization, was killed in a parking garage over a dispute that Frank had started and Marco had been sent to finish. Marco had been dead for 11 days when Frank woke up at 3 in the morning and looked at the ceiling and understood with absolute clarity that he had been building the wrong thing his entire life. He had dismantled his operation over 8 months. He had paid what debts could be paid. He had cooperated with federal prosecutors on 2 cases in exchange for a reduced sentence on a third, served 22 months, and walked out of a minimum security facility in Wisconsin 4 years ago with a single bag and a decision. He was going to be a different person, not a reformed version of the same person. A different one. He found a job through a former attorney who still believed in things like second chances and redemption arcs. Security work. Honest, unglamorous, physically manageable. He showed up every day. He did the job. He stayed out of everything he was supposed to stay out of. He went to a grief counselor every other Thursday and talked about Marco and cried exactly once in 14 months and considered that progress. His ex-wife Sharon had allowed him to see his daughter Keisha with increasing frequency as the years passed and the sobriety held and the evidence accumulated that he was not the man she had married. Keisha was 17 and cautious and had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and Frank loved her with the specific terrified love of a man who knows exactly how much he does not deserve what he is being given. He took the red line to work every morning because it was cheaper than parking and because, as his counselor had suggested, regular contact with ordinary life was useful for a man who had spent a decade insulated from it. The ordinary life did not always know what to do with him. He was used to the way people moved when he got on the train. The slight shift of weight away, the eyes that slid to the phone or the window, the mothers who repositioned their strollers. He understood it. He did not enjoy it, but he understood it. He had spent 44 years in this skin, in this body, with this history written on his face and his arms, and he had made the choices that wrote it there. He was not in the business of feeling sorry for himself about the consequences. On this particular morning, he was standing near the center doors with both hands on the overhead bar and his eyes on the middle distance, doing the mental preparation for a shift review meeting he was not looking forward to, when the woman to his left turned around and screamed. Everything that followed happened in under 60 seconds. Her name was Brenda Walsh. She was in her late 40s, a real estate agent from Lincoln Park, and she had an expression on her face that Frank would later understand was not entirely dishonest, which was the most complicated part. She had felt something. She was not making up the feeling. She had made up the conclusion. The car went cold in that particular way that only happens when a social emergency occurs in a confined space. Every head turned. Every calculation ran. Frank watched the math happening on 30 different faces simultaneously, and he knew what answer they were all arriving at, because he had seen it before, because he had been seen before, because there was a version of this calculation that he had been on the wrong side of his entire life and apparently had not finished being on the wrong side of yet. He held up his hands, both of them still touching the bar, visibly and physically unable to have reached across 3 feet of packed humanity to touch this woman. He said, clearly and calmly, "I did not touch you." Nobody looked at his hands. A man near the doors said, "Sure, buddy." Frank's jaw tightened. He had been in rooms where his word was the last word. He had been in rooms where men were afraid to disagree with him. He was standing in a subway car in the city he had lived in his entire life, and not one person was willing to give him 30 seconds of reasonable doubt. He stopped talking. There was no point. He looked at the floor. He waited. He did not see the girl watching him from 8 feet away. Layla had put her phone down when the woman screamed. She had seen everything. She had been awake in the way that people who operate on insufficient sleep learn to be awake, the kind of alertness that runs on necessity rather than rest, constantly cataloging the immediate environment for anything that requires attention. She had seen Frank's hands on the bar. She had seen the man in the gray suit who was standing directly behind Brenda Walsh, the pleasant-faced white man with the wire-rimmed glasses who looked like a dentist or a school board member or somebody's reassuring uncle. She had seen his arm extend. She had seen it retract the instant the woman cried out. She had seen the expression on his face when he pulled it back, which was not the expression of an innocent man witnessing a false accusation. It was the expression of a man doing a very fast calculation about whether this was going to land on him or not, and watching with relief as it landed somewhere else. Layla knew what she had seen. She also knew what happened when an 18-year-old black girl in a worn uniform stood up on a crowded train car and accused a well-dressed white man of something while defending a tattooed former mobster. She knew what happened. She had been on the receiving end of who are you to say her entire life, in smaller ways, in quieter registers, in the accumulated thousand moments of being the girl who could not afford the field trip or the yearbook or the lunch table where everyone else was sitting. She looked at Frank DeLuca. He had stopped talking. He was looking at the floor with the specific stillness of a man who has decided that the situation is simply what it is, and the only thing left is to endure it. Layla's father used to say, "The moment you see wrong and walk past it, you become part of it." She opened her mouth. "That's not him." 8 people turned to look at her. I was watching the whole time. His hands never left the bar. It was that man. She pointed at the gray suit. Her hand was not steady. She kept it up anyway. He pulled his arm back the second she turned around. I watched him do it. The man in the gray suit said, "I have no idea what you're talking about," with the smooth confidence of a man who has never had his word questioned in public. "I know what I saw," Layla said. "Young lady," someone said from behind her, "you need to stay out of this." Layla did not stay out of it. The transit officer who boarded at the next stop took her statement and 4 others. The investigation that followed was not long. The man in the gray suit was Craig Sutton, 51 of Evanston, and Craig Sutton had 2 prior arrests on 2 other transit lines, both cases resulting in plea deals, both cases involving a well-dressed man with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that said "not him" to everyone who had not done their homework. Frank DeLuca was released. Craig Sutton was taken off the train. The crowd dispersed the way crowds always disperse when they have been wrong, fast and without ceremony. Frank found Layla near the doors as she was pulling her backpack on. "Hey," he said. She turned and looked up at him, this large man whose presence had emptied half a train car, and she met his eyes directly in the way she met everything, straight on, no flinching. "Thank you," he said. "I mean that. I just said what I saw." "I know," Frank said. "That's the part that matters." She got off at the next stop. He watched the doors close. He thought about her for the next 4 days. He called a man named Eddie Reyes who ran a private investigations firm in Logan Square and who owed Frank the kind of favor that does not expire. He gave Eddie what he had. Young black woman, early teens, Jefferson High, red line, 7:40 a.m. He asked for discretion and a file. The file came back in 6 days. Layla Brooks, 18 years old, father deceased, mother with congestive heart failure, currently unable to work. Layla employed at 3 jobs simultaneously. GPA 3.9. Nursing school application in progress. Projected debt load at graduation, $31,000. Current savings, $340. Frank read it twice and set it down on the kitchen table and sat with his hands flat on either side of it. He was not a sentimental man. He had made his fortune and built his operation by being clear-eyed about people, which in his old life had meant useful or not useful, and in his new life meant something closer to, "Do I have anything to offer here?" He had 3 things he could offer anyone: money, time, and a phone full of people who still picked up when he called. He was about to find out how far each of those things went. He pulled up his bank app. $44,000, built over 4 years of living small and spending less. He held the number in his head for a moment. Then he started making calls. The construction company took him back without questions. He spent 5 days on a crew pulling 10-hour shifts, doing work that his 44-year-old body had opinions about that he declined to hear. He also drove for a moving company 3 evenings that week, 4 hours a shift, loading and unloading through a lower back situation that he managed with ibuprofen and stubbornness. By Friday, he had added $23,000 to what he had. Still short. He called Tommy Ricci, who had been his number 2 for 6 years and who now owned a landscaping business in Naperville that was doing well enough that Tommy had put both his kids through college. He called D. Marcus Dunn, who ran a very decent Italian restaurant in Wicker Park and who had the particular quality of a man who had decided that feeding people was a form of apology to the world. He called Ray Estrada, who was the best private investigator in the city and who had been Frank's closest friend since they were both in situations they were each grateful to no longer be in. He told them what he needed. He did not ask for anything. He just told them. Tommy showed up that same night. Dee came the next morning. Ray arrived with an envelope and a lecture about Frank's blood pressure that Frank received in silence. Between the four of them, they put together $80,000 on a kitchen table in a two-bedroom apartment on Belmont Avenue. And Frank sat there and looked at it and at the men who had brought it there and felt something he did not have a clean word for. "You didn't have to," he said. "We know," Ray said. "That's not a factor." Frank sent the envelope the next morning. No name on the outside. A single handwritten note inside. "You did not know me. You had no reason to help me, and every reason to keep your head down. You helped me anyway. What you did on that train was the most honest thing anyone has done for me in 20 years. This is not a debt. This is one human being to another. Take care of your mother." He did not sign it. He did not need to. Layla sat on the floor of their apartment hallway with $80,000 in her lap and read the note 4 times. Then she pressed it to her chest and let herself cry in a way she had not allowed herself to cry in years. The full weight of it, all the 4:55 mornings and the worn-out shoes and the lunches eaten alone and the grief she had been carrying since she was 13 years old that she had never had the time or the safety to fully put down. Her mother found her there 20 minutes later. Carol Brooks looked at her daughter on the floor and the envelope in her hands and sat down beside her on the floor, right there in the hallway, without asking any questions. Layla told her everything. Carol was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "God doesn't waste anything." The surgery was scheduled for the following week. It was successful. Carol Brooks woke up in recovery with her daughter's hand in hers and a color in her face that Layla had not seen in 3 years. "You look like yourself," Layla said. "I feel like myself," Carol said. Layla held her mother's hand and did not say anything else for a while and did not need to. She found Frank 8 weeks later. It took her 6 days of showing up at the office building where Eddie Reyes, after some persuasion, confirmed he worked. She waited in the lobby one Thursday morning, and when he walked through the door, she stood up and said his name. He stopped. He looked at her. Something shifted on his face. They sat across from each other in a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue for 2 hours. Layla told him about her mother's recovery. She told him about her nursing school acceptance letter, which had come 3 weeks after the surgery, and about the scholarship that covered 2/3 of the first year, and about how she was going to handle the rest. She told him that she thought about the note every day and that she kept it in the front pocket of her nursing school binder, where she could see it. Frank told her about Marco. He had not planned to, but she asked about the tattoos the way someone asks when they're genuinely curious rather than making a point. And one thing led to another, and he found himself telling a story he did not usually tell. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "I'm sorry about Marco." Frank nodded. "He would have been proud of what you did," she said. Frank looked at his coffee. "You didn't know him." "No," Layla said, "but I know you. A little. And I think the person you are now is the person he deserved to have looking out for him." Frank did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "You're going to be a hell of a nurse." She smiled for the first time. It was a real smile, not the composed, polite expression she had been wearing most of the morning. It changed her whole face. "I know," she said. Before she left, she told him about something that had happened during her first clinical rotation at Mercy Hospital the week before. She had been assigned to the cardiac monitoring ward. Room 414 had a patient she recognized, Brenda Walsh, the woman from the train. She had come in alone, no family listed, anxiety written into every line of her face. The other nursing students on the rotation had been told the story by someone and were maintaining a professional but unmistakable distance. Layla had gone in. "She recognized me immediately," Layla said. "I could see it happen." She went completely still. A pause. Then she started apologizing. She said she had known when it was happening that something was wrong, that the man behind her had already pulled his hand away, and she had just kept pointing because she was embarrassed to admit she had made a mistake in front of everyone. Frank said nothing. She said she had thought about it every day since. Layla said that she had looked up what happened to you, how it turned out, that she felt sick about it. She looked at her hands. She was crying. This woman who put you through all of that was sitting in a hospital bed crying because of what she did. What did you do? Frank asked. I sat down, Layla said, and I told her that I accepted her apology. And then I told her something my mother told me a long time ago. She looked up. Forgiveness is not about saying that what someone did was okay. It is about deciding that you are not going to let someone else's worst moment live in you forever. It is something you do for yourself. Frank was quiet. She cried harder, Layla said. Then she calmed down. Then she let me take her blood pressure. A small pause. It was high. Frank made a sound that might have been a laugh. The point is, Layla said, I think she needed to hear that. And I think I needed to say it. She looked at him directly. I think some things you do for someone else, and some things you do for yourself, and sometimes it's the exact same thing. Frank looked at the young woman across the table from him. 20 years old, nursing student, 3 jobs, worn out shoes, 4 hours of sleep, and somewhere in their capacity for this. He thought about who he had been at 20. He thought about the 44 years it had taken him to arrive at a kitchen table with $80,000 that was not his own money being contributed by men who had no obligation to him, except the obligation people feel toward each other when they have been through enough together to know what actually matters. You're going to change a lot of rooms, he said, just by walking into them. Layla picked up her bag. That's the plan, she said. 3 years later, Frank DeLuca attended a graduation ceremony at the University of Illinois, Chicago. He sat in the back because he was not sure of his welcome and did not want to impose on anyone's day. He watched the procession of graduates cross the stage in alphabetical order, and when the BS came up, he watched Layla Brooks receive her nursing degree and shake the dean's hand and look out at the auditorium with the expression of a person who has arrived somewhere they have been walking toward for a very long time. Her mother, Carol, was in the 3rd row, clapping with both hands above her head. Afterward in the courtyard, Layla found him standing at the edge of the crowd. She hugged him. It was not a careful or polite hug. It was the hug of someone who means it. You came, she said. You graduated, he said. Behind her, Carol Brooks walked up and looked at Frank for a long moment. He had never met her. He had not been sure this introduction would happen. Carol said, I have been wanting to meet you for 3 years. Frank said, Ma'am. Carol said, Don't ma'am me. You saved my daughter's life when she needed it most, and I'm going to say thank you to your face. Frank said, She saved mine first. Carol looked at him. Then she put her arms around him the way a mother hugs someone, completely and without reservation. And Frank stood there in a courtyard full of graduates and their families and did not know what to do with his hands, and then put them around her and held on. Layla watched the two of them and thought about what her father used to say, that goodness was not complicated, that it was just one person deciding to treat another person like they mattered, and then that person doing the same thing for someone else, and the circle going on as long as there were people willing to keep it going. She thought about Brenda Walsh, who had sent her a card the previous Christmas with a note that said, I think about our conversation every day. I'm trying to do better. Layla had written back. They had not become friends. That was not what forgiveness required. But the door was open in a way it had not been before, and Layla thought that was enough. She thought about a tired girl in a train car with 4 hours of sleep and a worn-out shoe and a choice. She thought about the particular kind of courage that does not announce itself, that shows up without a uniform or an audience, that is just a person looking at another person and deciding, in the middle of everyone else deciding otherwise, that this particular human being deserves the truth. She thought that this was, in the end, the only revolution that had ever actually worked. One person, one moment, the truth, spoken out loud into a space that does not want to hear it, and everything that follows. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you would like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next chapter we are preparing for you.